Thanks for joining us for today's live Q&A. We're celebrating AU Pollinator Week here down under, and we just picked a pile of cucumbers from our cucumber vine just around the corner. Getting this much every day, and we've been having a lot of cucumber recipes here for lunch with the Flow Hive team, so it's very cool to get so much produce, and it's really shows when you have a lot of bees around how much the garden just goes ballistic for those species that need pollinating. And it's such a reminder that our whole food system does rely on these amazing little pollinators that we need to pollinate and do their thing and spread the pollen from flower to flower as they go. And a single beehive, when they're bigger than this is a swarm we caught, so it's small, but when they get big and they have, say, 50,000 bees in them, then a single hive can pollinate 50 million flowers in a day, and that's just absolutely extraordinary, I think. And our agricultural system is now wrapped up with the European honeybee because we just don't have anything else that can do that amount of pollination. So we're celebrating AU Pollinator Week. If you've got questions, put it in the comments below and we'll get to answering those as we go. So we'll put these here for our beautiful lunch. And what we're actually going to do is an inspection by pulling apart this hive, which is a swarm we caught recently, and we're just going to be fixing up some of the comb inside because it's naturally drawn comb. Occasionally, quite often they don't, and so we're just blowing a little bit of smoke in the entrance. I'm going to put my bee suit on. Really good idea to give yourself a good bee suit and protect yourself, especially if you're new to bees. Wear your gloves as well. Make sure you're looking after yourselves. Bees do have quite a nasty sting. So are we all good? Is the technology working? Okay.
Looking good.
If you've got comments, put it in the questions below. I'm just going to take this roof off, and what we'll do is crack the inner cover and have a look at what's going on. Look at that. This little swarm is starting to get on its feet now, which is great. You can see a whole bunch of drones here. They're the bigger boy bees. If you've got questions, put them in the comments below. We'll answer those. We're celebrating Australian Pollinator Week here for our important little pollinators that make the world go round. Okay. Now sometimes the queen could be up here, right? Because there's no excluder in place. So always have a look on the inner cover just in case, because you don't want to orphan her from the hive or she may not make it back in. Can't see her there. And next, now Pete's done a little bit of work in this hive, just straightening the comb. He did that a few weeks ago, so let's see how it went. Look at that yellow comb. Isn't that cool? They must be onto some interesting forage because that fresh virgin wax is bright yellow, which happens sometimes. Often it's a more bright white colour, but in this case it's fluoro yellow. Very cool. You can see how they're building nice on the comb guide here and just drifting a little bit. And that's something with naturally drawn comb that you should do, is check it often at the start while they're getting on their feet and just push it back into position. I'll show you how to do that easily. Just grab your hive tool like this and just push it over. If you break the whole thing off, then you can use some rubber bands to hold it in place. But they'll fix up that little bit I've damaged, and they'll do that very quickly. And that'll just keep them in line for a nice straight comb. Once you get them going straight, they should follow suit after that. Now the next one is a bit interesting. It's actually doubled up. Have a look at this. So they've gone along, they've gone a bit wonky, and then they've started again here. And they've overlapped. And they've got some brood in here. So we want to be careful with this comb because there's bees going through their metamorphosis down the little cells. You can see this style of capping here is worker brood. So beneath that is the larvae going through their changes. Doesn't it look cool? Any questions, put it in the comments below as we get to explore this world of bees here. Okay, so every now and then you get a hive that for whatever reason wants to go wonky, and this is one of them. See this section here? Should be more in there. Some brood on this side too. And some bright orange pollen down the cells, which looks super cool. Okay, to fix that up, we actually need to take some of the comb away. So luckily this doesn't have any brood in it. I'm just going to get my hive tool. We'll move this smoker out of the way. And I'm chipping away at the top here just to allow this to then push back in line, but we've got an overlap, so I'm actually going to take some comb away now, like this, and we're pushing this back into line, which is where we want it to be, right on that comb guide. So naturally drawn comb can be a bit more work in the hive, but it's less work in the shed where you don't have to go through wax and wiring and putting the foundation in and so on. All you need is this surround, and the bees usually do a great job, but in this case they've gone a bit wonky. So a little bit of encouragement will get them going straight. Any questions coming in?
Yes, Seeds. There's lots of questions coming in, and happy Pollinator Week from Chuck, our ambassador. Thanks a lot, Chuck. Caddy is asking on YouTube, what's the perfect location for a hive? They have livestock and are looking at putting the beehive in a fenced area. Couple of questions. How far from the fence should the hive be, and also how far away from a wild colony?
Okay, livestock can be annoying sometimes. The cows can be curious, they can get up to the hive and actually knock them over. Now if a beehive's left knocked over for too long, you can get into an issue where they abscond. If you catch it quickly, you can put it back up again and the bees will be fine and they'll stay. So fencing it off from livestock is a good idea, and you only really need to put the fence right around them, you know, with a metre or so, so that the curious livestock can't actually knock over the hive. And then you should be fine with having them coexisting in the same area. Okay. Look at that. You could use electric fencing too. Some people use electric fencing. Some people use electric fencing for bears actually. We don't have bears here in Australia. We have koala bears, or so they're called, but they're not really a bear. But they eat tree leaves, so they're up the gum trees. But some people use electric fencing in Canada, I believe, where they've got bears, but livestock you could also use electric fencing for. Okay, so that's back in line now. The bees will fix that and join it back together. So we've done...
See, just before you pop that frame, and someone's just asked, see how you've got the yellow looking brood on that? Is that brood? Because normally it's the brownie colour.
It is. So the look changes. This is virgin wax, and they're on some interesting forage just recently. It was white in the beginning, and they've just topped it with this amazing yellow colour. And this is the lighter colour looking brood. So when brood's being capped with virgin wax, it'll look like this. When it's being capped with old recycled wax, it'll look more brown, but that similar texture that isn't quite as see-through as the honeycomb. So after a while you get your eye in and you can tell the difference, but that's definitely brood there, which is great because it means we've got a laying queen. I'm not seeing a lot of nectar in here though, so they are a little bit hungry. So the limiting factor here on this hive for how fast it can develop is actually nectar. Hopefully something starts flowering soon. Now let's have a look. This next frame, a couple of weeks ago, hold brood in place. So let's see if they are joining or not. Hold brood on there. Great. Yes, they've joined. That's all joined on. this isn't yet. It's just sitting there. They've joined it to the side, but they need to do a bit of building to get up to the top here. So that should work out for them. Often if you've got a bit of comb like that with nothing in it, you can just take it away and use it to make candles with. You don't necessarily have to rubber band it in unless there is some brood in there. If it's got a bit of honey, you could take that away and enjoy it. Right now we don't want to take honey away from this little hive because it's still building up and it's not. Any more questions coming in, Chase?
Yes, it's on Insta coming in. Someone's tuned in and they've got a small window box of veggies. I think they mean a window box with veggies in it, but they just noticed there's no bees around. Just wondering, how small a hive can you have?
Okay, so the European honeybee actually needs a hive. The smallest you can go for a colony that you're maintaining is 2 of these boxes. You don't really want to go smaller than that because they're going to swarm often throughout the spring and summer because the hive just really isn't big enough for the colony size that they want to get to. So 2 of these boxes is the smallest you can go. People do keep bees on balconies in the city, so you certainly can do that. You can have a window hive, but it is going to be that big. And to me that's a very small size in terms of farming. To get real produce, usually it requires a bigger area, but bees are this amazing species that can go and forage and use the flowers in, say, a 6-mile radius and bring all of that nectar back into your hive, turn it into this amazing thing we call honey, and lucky for us they often make more than they need and we can share some too.
Just wanting to check your mic there, Seeds. Is everything looking all right for you, Callum? It's just a couple of people saying it's a bit fading in and out.
Okay.
Are we good?
We good? 1, 2, testing 1, 2.
Testing.
It's on now.
It's on now, okay, thanks for that.
Thanks.
That's great.
Keeping
Got
us
an
on our
audience there
toes.
who's looking after us. Alright.
And that just went.
Yep,
Oh.
we're having some technical problems here this morning, so just bear with us. 1, 2. Okay, so here we have another frame. And there's a bunch of brood on that, and here's a piece rubber banded into place again. And they've connected on the bottom, they've connected on the side, and they'll be doing some interesting building to get it up to the top here. Now, if I wanted to assist a little bit, I'll break off this little bit here because that one is going a little bit wonky. Give them another go at doing a good job. It's always neat when you catch a little swarm and you're nursing it into being a bigger hive because you get to watch very intimately the process of them building, and it's just amazing to look in and see how they're doing. And having a little colony is a great way to start because if you're new to beekeeping, you've got less bees, it's a bit less daunting, and you can just check off and really get to know your bees. There we go. A lot of brood in here, it's a really good sign. I haven't been looking for the queen, but perhaps I should start looking in case she's there. We're celebrating Australian Pollinator Week here, and just the amazing job our European honeybee does for us with our gardens, with our agriculture. So many people write in every week saying how since they've got their hive, how their garden's just gone ballistic with produce. So it's fantastic to hear that.
Great. See, Claire's tuned in saying they've just picked up their bees and have been advised to put the super on as they are now ready for, they need the room basically for the bees. Just wondering then, how do they carry out an inspection in the next week if the super is on with the bees in it?
Okay, so what you need to do is take the super off. If you've just put it on, it won't be too heavy yet. We've got lots of videos showing you, if you look up brood inspections, Flow Hive, you'll see a lot of videos where we're doing our brood inspection, but first we've had to take the super off. So you use your chisel tool, which this is the one that comes, this is the one on our store, and you can get in between the two hives and just loosen it up. Now, if you've had it on there a while and there's a lot of honey in the super, then it will be heavy. If you're not strongly built, then get another person to help you lift that off. So always a good idea to have a couple of bee suits around in case you do need some help. Another thing you can do if you're on your own and it is too heavy is you take some of the flow frames out just to reduce the weight, and then you can take the super off. I usually put it on the end, so I put it on the end like that, so you don't squash any of the bees that are on the bottom, and then you can go about your brood inspection. Also, the beekeeper.org has a wealth of knowledge, high quality video training from experts all around the world, and gets rave reviews. It's also a great fundraiser, and we've created a lot of new habitat for bees to create literally billions of blossoms already, with over 1.5 million trees planted so far from the beekeeper.org. Look at that. The rubber bands have helped secure this bit of comb. This swarm went wonky a couple of weeks ago. Pete fixed up the wonky comb by using rubber bands to hold it in place. And look, it's working well. They've joined it all along the bottom here. It's looking straight now. All they need to do is keep building to fill out the space. And when they've completed all of these frames, it'll be time to put the super on.
So Chris is asking from South Australia, says they have a lot of bees that I think are washboarding, and just wondering if you can explain this phenomenon and its cause and whether we need to do anything about that.
You don't. If anybody's got specifics on why bees do washboarding, apart from if they're celebrating and having a bit of a hoedown, then chime in the comments below. What it is that the bees are forming a bit of a pattern, and they might be at the entrance here, and it's like at the football stadiums when everybody's doing the wave and they're moving in such a way that you get this washboard effect across the surface of the bees. And I'm not exactly sure why they do it, but if you've got the answer, chime in.
Right.
It's so good to see people answering each other's questions. I've learnt so much over the years, and it's just fantastic to have a community that helps each other. So if you've got the answers, by all means, chime in. It's all about just exploring this fascinating world of bees and helping each other learn along the way. Look at this little bit of comb. We might knock that off. You see how it's doubled up here? That's an easy one just to remove, and that'll straighten up that little bit.
Oh, that's great, Cedar, because one of the questions on Insta is they've tuned in and said their comb is a bit wonky, but whenever I remove a capped frame, it rips the capping and honey goes everywhere. Is there anything I can do to help the frames not get stuck together, or bridging wax?
Yes, if you can get them going straight, then that's great. Some people choose to put foundation in just to increase the chances of it getting nice and straight comb. But if you work at it a little bit, most of the time they will just build straight. Like, I mean, 90-something% of the time I've dumped swarms in a box just with wooden frames like this, completely empty with the comb guide in the top, and they've gone straight. But this hive is one that's gone wonky, so I wanted to show you that and give you some tips on straightening it up. So the rubber band technique is one, which you can see we've been using in this hive. The other one is just to push it back on line. So see how this is starting to take off in this direction? So what I'm going to do is just get my hive tool and push it across a little bit. Just like that. And notice I'm wrecking the comb a little bit, but the bees will be very quick to fix that up again, and they'll fix it up in the right spot this time. And that'll just keep them going on the comb guide, and once they've got nice straight combs, it'll be easier to inspect next time. As you say, if you've got comb all joining, then it gets hard and you're ripping comb and so on. But one tip is when you go to do your inspection, just have a look at which comb is the easiest to take out first. Could be an edge one, could be a middle one. Just have a look at one that's nice and straight. Make some space by levering them apart. Pull that first one up. Then the next one goes sideways with, and that'll be much easier if you've got a lot of comb joining between frames. And it's often the edge combs that are the wonkiest. And here we have, they're doing a nice job here actually. Look at that. Look at the brood, look at the pollen. It's very nice. Any more questions, put it in the comments below. We're celebrating Australian Pollinator Week here and giving thanks to this special species that does the majority of our pollination in our food chain. But not to forget that all around us we have the native species. We have 20,000-ish species in the world of bees, and a lot of them are solitary, meaning they only nest in a little hole in mud or in a tube. Yesterday I was under my house where I saw a teddy bear bee go, which is, it looks a bit like a bumblebee. It's a big native Australian fluffy bee. And then I saw it dive into a little hole and I thought, yes, I'm finally going to get footage of the teddy bear bee coming out of this little hole in the mud under my house. And I sat there for ages and it never came out. So I'll keep working on that one. But just having some spaces unkept for the bees to use is a great idea. An area of your yard that has mulch built up, reeds and tubes, or you can get our Pollinator house, which is an upcycled product, which is also a fundraiser. And the idea is it's an inspirational little build which doesn't take too long with your family, and we supply all the little bamboo tubes for it. And it's a great little piece of learning for your family. Nice to put it on the wall, perhaps under the eave of your house, and that's where the bees seem to go crazy for it. And you get the resin bees here in Australia, the masked bees, all sorts of little native bees will come and you can watch those pollinators do their work. Super important. Habitat is the primary cause of what we are in the 6th mass extinction. So anywhere we can give habitat back, we need to. And that's also why we've started the beekeeper.org to really put some habitat back. So if you want to join that, it's an amazing learning tool with high quality training videos in bees from people all around the world. And it's also a great fundraiser for habitat. 1.5 million trees planted so far. Okay, there's one little bit I'm going to get off here as well. Now none of this wax has any honey in it, which is good because I don't want to leave honey out for the bees or they'll get a taste for robbing. But I can tell the bees are hungry because there's no nectar actually stored here. There's plenty of pollen but no nectar. So if I was in a climate where I had many months of that, then I'd definitely be feeding this hive. I could feed them now, but we usually don't because something will be flowering next week. Actually, I said no nectar, but there's actually just a little bit twinkling here. Now, these bees will use a frame of honey to raise a frame of brood, so they do need that nectar in order to raise all of their young. Any more questions coming in?
Nice one. Seeds, you were just talking before about foundation, and Gay's asking why don't we supply wax foundation, especially for newbies, for new beekeepers?
So you can, but it's another learning curve and you need to get the jumper leads out to your car battery and then connect it up and melt the wax foundation in to the wires. And as soon as I learnt you didn't have to do that, I was like, wow, what a relief, because it's a lot of tedious work. Doesn't guarantee that they're going to build straight. And bees actually do a great job of building comb themselves. That's what they've always done. So why not let them do it? And the drawback is every now and then, like this hive, you get some wonky frame to push in, but it's a lot less work in my opinion than sitting there waxing and wiring frames in the shed at night time. So, but it's up to you. My father likes to put a couple of foundation sheets in a hive just to give them a nice straight start, so you can do that too. But it's also, the bees get to size the cells for themselves. So I believe that has a health benefit for the bees. They can build what they like, and that way they're building what they need to for the specific size of bee that they are. Humans came along and produced foundation sheets that were slightly too big, because the idea was if we did that, you'd have bigger bees and they'd forage for more honey. So foundation sheets typically come at 5.3 millimeters, but if you measure these cells, it'll be just under that, because they're naturally going to actually make cells that are a little bit less than that. So the cells that they want to build will regress back to 4.9 if you're not giving them foundation sheets. But the main reason is it's less work. But you can always go and grab some foundation and wire from your local beekeeping store if you want to. Have a place, see what's right for you. There is no right or wrong in beekeeping, there's just looking after your bees and making sure that you are.
And Ron's asking, Cedar, which bees do you think are the friendliest for their first flow hive, the Italian or the canolan?
Okay, each bee breeder will have their favourite breed and their favourite traits. So the Italian bee is often said to be a nice, gentle, productive bee, a great one to use. But, the Carnolian, I would say actually that the friendliness doesn't necessarily relate to the exact breed. It's more, if you want a nice gentle hive like this one, then ask for a nice gentle hive when you're purchasing some bees off a bee breeder or purchasing a queen off a queen breeder. And that way, it's just a joy like this. I don't have my gloves on. If they were starting to sting, I would put my gloves on and so on. And it just makes it a bit easier to look after the bees. And also if you've got them in a prominent position like this, where you're close to where we're eating lunch and so on, then you want to choose a friendly hive for this location. So rather than whether it's Italian or Carnolian or Caucasian, I think the best thing to do is just ask for nice gentle genetics that are productive and ideally hygienic as well, which is a trait where they look after themselves better and clean out things like chalk brood or you know, there's even genetics that are said to handle varroa. So there's a lot of people working on that as well. In the end, if you can get the bees to look after themselves, then that's perfect.
Great, Cedar. And Katia was the one who asked the question before, Cedar, but I think your microphone wasn't quite up. The one about the fencing with the cattle in the yard. Didn't hear the bit about what you'd said about the wild bee question. How close could they keep the hive next to the wild bees?
Next to the wild bees?
Yeah.
Okay, if you've got wild bees, then well, they can actually be really quite close to each other. If you watch how commercial operators are, they will often put the hives just right up against each other, wall to wall, and that's okay. So if your wild bees are as the European honeybee, Apis mellifera, then they can just be right next to each other. There is no problem. And I don't believe there's any problem with other species like the Australian TC bees as well. Tetragonia carbonaria, native sugar bag bees. You'll often see them coexisting together and sharing the same flowers and so on. So I can't see any issues with proximity to other bees.
Nice. Maddox is wondering, Cedar, just bought a hive, really excited, but a bit worried about giving it enough attention as they travel for work. Just wondering, do the hives need constant maintenance and attention?
So the wonderful thing about bees is it's not like chickens where you've got to shut the gate every night and feed them often and all of that. You can go away for weeks and months and your bees are usually fine. Having said that, there is times of year where it's more intensive, like the springtime. If you've got varroa, for instance, in your area, then there'll be some treatment you'll be doing in order to make sure your bees have a low mite load. So there might be more inspections you'll need to do then. There'll be the as needed inspections. Let's say your beehive was going along fine, you're looking in the windows, you're seeing lots of bees, everything was great, and then suddenly there was less bees. Then that's the time to get in there and take the hive apart like this and have a look, make sure you've got brood. If you've got brood, then you've got a queen that's been laying, and your bees will then build back up again from there. Perhaps they've swarmed in the springtime, so that's the other one in spring management to limit swarming. So you might be taking splits in the springtime, taking some of these frames out to start another colony or to give to a friend, and that'll reduce the likelihood of that hive swarming. So yeah, I think they're wonderful because you can get a real amount of amazing produce with actually not having to be there every day like a lot of farming of animals is.
Nice. So Robert's wondering, how do you handle a honey-bound brood box?
So if you're, it's typically springtime when you've got that issue. They're bringing in lots of nectar and they've loaded up the bottom box here before the queen's really started laying, and then she's got nowhere to lay, and then she's more likely to swarm. So if you've got your super on already, then harvest some honey from the super and the bees will naturally move some honey upstairs. Or if you want to manipulate them and do it faster, then you could simply take some of the honeycomb out of the edge here. Enjoy that. If you've got naturally drawn comb, you can just cut it straight out there onto a plate and put the frame straight back in the middle, and you've alleviated that issue of not enough room. The bees will quickly draw some comb, the queen will have more area to lay. So they're your things. You can add more boxes and the bees will move honey upstairs. You can harvest honey from your top boxes and the bees will move honey upstairs, or you can physically take some of the honeycomb out from below, and that will alleviate that pressure. If it is honey bound and it is springtime, the likelihood is that it will push the bees to swarm, and half the bees will fly off to find a new home, which is not ideal as a beekeeper, because then you get this big drop in population. If you're in an urban area, you might as well annoy your neighbour with a swarm hanging off their washing line or whatnot. If you've got friendly neighbours, might not be a problem. You can just go over there and collect it. But it's one of the things we try to do as beekeepers is limit swarming, and that typically is in the early spring.
Great. Aiden's in USA and Oregon, and just wondering, do they leave their super on in the winter time?
Oregon, it does
Yeah.
get cold there. I have been to Oregon, and so you've got snow, and my guess is some people will and some people won't. I think at minimum what you need to do is take your excluder out from between the two boxes, or if you've got more boxes, so that your bees can travel as a swarm ball, keeping warm through the hive as they consume the remaining honey, and the queen won't be left behind under the excluder. So that's the minimum, but generally people like to reduce the size of their hive for the winter, give them a little bit less space to actually keep warm, because the bees disconnect their wing muscles and they vibrate to warm the hive, and if there's a lot of space in the hive, that'll just be harder for them. So they generally will, let's say you had 4 boxes, you might take a couple off for winter and reduce it to 2. If you had 3 boxes, you might take 1 off and reduce it to 2. If you had 2 boxes, you might decide to leave both of them there, so they have some stores for the winter. If you've got any empty boxes, take them off. But ask your local beekeepers how much honey you might need to leave your colony to survive the Oregon winter.
Great. Greg's just got a couple of comments. He just said he's seen native bees and honeybees working side by side on the same flowers happily, but also seen the native bees collecting pollen dropped on the landing board of the flow hive without any issues, but the native bees never attempt to go inside the hive.
Ah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I've never seen them collecting pollen. I have seen them collecting a little honey from around the back. So that's a little bit cheeky, but fair's fair, I guess. But pollen from the landing board, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So that's a fascinating one to hear. I imagine the bees wouldn't let them inside. They guard their entrance pretty thoroughly. They don't let ants in their hive. They will try not to let anything in. They'll try not to let wasps in if you've got yellow jackets in your area. We don't have them here. And yeah, so they're unlikely to let them in.
Great. Mr. Beach, Shane from Bribey Island, just put a nuke in and is going well. The frames had waxed paper, which is being bought out of the hive by the bees in pieces. Is this normal? Wax paper.
Waxed paper, so there must be some paper in your hive somewhere. But bees are industrious, and if you have a sheet of newspaper dividing two boxes, let's say you've been doing a merge or something, they'll tear that to pieces and chuck it out the front. So somewhere in your hive there is some paper for some reason. Not sure why. But the bees will deal with it.
Yeah, maybe they're reading the paper or something.
Reading the newspaper, you reckon,
Yeah,
Trace?
maybe. The Bee Weekly or something.
Oh, here's some nectar too. That's good to see. See it glinting up here? They're not completely starved, but they're pretty low. They are collecting some nectar. Super friendly bees. Bees aren't always like this, so look after yourself as a new beekeeper. Wear your bee suit, wear your gloves. Learn how to tell the difference between a hive that's grumpy and a hive that's not before you go experimenting with taking your gloves off. Be kind to yourself. Okay.
See, the salty convict is asking, how often after putting on the Flow Super should I be doing brood inspections? They live in Adelaide.
Okay, so if you go and you've probably got your super on now because it's the springtime, and let's see, it's probably not that demanding right now. You put the super on, you can probably leave them a while and just watch their numbers through the windows and make sure they're building up. If you see the numbers dropping, then take the super off and have a look. But we don't have the high demanding varroa mite all over Australia yet. So you can probably leave it for weeks and months before you do another inspection. But having said that, it's a great learning thing to get in there and do a lot of this to really feel comfortable with your beekeeping, so that when you do have an issue, you don't hesitate, you just get in there and find out what the problem is. I'm just going to move this across a bit. There we go. Just get them more in line like that. Good. See if I can straighten this comb out. Nice. That'll just help for later. Okay.
Right,
Australian Pollinator Week here. If you've got questions, put it in the comments. Trace is reading those questions out. If you've got answers to other people's questions, then chime in. It's always great to see you. Also let us know whereabouts in the world you're tuning in from. Super interesting to us. We've got flow hives in 130 something different countries, which is pretty cool. It's an amazing community that sprung up around our invention, and it's just amazing hearing people tune in from all over the world.
See, question coming in, just wondering, because this hive is so calm, wondering, do we breed our own queens or do we just purchase queens with good genetics?
You know, occasionally we will purchase in queens, but a lot of the time we let them breed their own. So we really just replace the queens when there's traits we don't like aggression and so on. Having said that, it's been hard to get queens this season with the restrictions around varroa mite. There was a lot of queen breeders that didn't breed this year. So it might be hard to find queens at the moment, so we might be relying on the bees just doing what they do and raising their own.
Lots of question seeds about, I think, when people add their supers, and Lauren's asking, installed a package about a week ago, there's lots of flowers and they're filling up quickly. How long do you think I can add the super? And there's quite a few people asking the same question about when do you add your super?
Okay, that's a great question. The answer we always give is when they've finished all the frames. See how there's a bit of blank space here? There often is right along the bottom, a little bit of blank space, but what you want to see is the majority of each frame being used by the bees with their comb. So if you have a look out to the edges, this hive isn't ready for a super yet because it hasn't filled up the box. Look at this one, it's really quite empty. And they've got work to do here. Once they've filled all of that up, all the way out in all the frames, then it's time to put your super on. Unless you've got a long cold winter ahead, in which case you might leave them without the super. But other times of year, you'll be then adding your super, and then the excitement begins of watching them store some honey in your flow frames.
Louise is tuning in from Mount Tambourine, not far from here, and just saying their hive was really thriving, but they swarmed and took all the honey. They've since made a new queen and are now back to a very busy hive with honey production back in full swing. Just wondering, should they put another brood box on to stop this one from swarming?
Ah, great question. So you can get later swarms, but typically the swarm season is more towards the beginning of spring in your area. So what I would say, if you just go ahead and harvest the honey as they fill up the frames, then that'll make enough space in the hive for the queen to lay, and they're unlikely to swarm. If you do want to really get into your beekeeping, then you could have a look in and see whether they're raising new queens and there's queen cells and so on. Or you could just harvest the honey and make sure that the hive isn't honey bound, and as the season ticks on, they're less and less likely to swarm. Mount Tambourine's a great spot. I've done a lot of paragliding off there, and I did a drone delivery, which was the first ever flow hive delivered in the world when we were doing our crowdfunding. I dressed up in a fluffy bee suit, took off with my paraglider and flew the first box of flow frames to our winner of the Vanuatu raffle fundraiser, where in the middle of our crowdfunding, Vanuatu got hit by a cyclone, and what we did is we raffled off the first hive in the world, and we raised $100,000 and donated that to the raffle. And it was a fun thing because the winner just happened to be near Mount Tambourine to deliver the box by air. So we're ahead of the curve with the drone deliveries.
Might have to do another one like that, Seeds, I think.
We'll put the link in the comments to show you that funny video.
Seeds, Bob and Tina are tuning in from Bonnells Bay, and they're just wondering, would it be not better to secure the transferred frame to the top as bees naturally build down? They're talking about the comb, I think.
Absolutely. And I was looking at that too. I think what's happened is Pete would have put it at the top and it slipped down. So if you can, when you're rubber banding it in, if you can get it to stay up the top, then that'll be better, because they're more likely, if they're building top upwards, to be wonky, then top down. Gravity helps them keep it in a straight line. But I'm just going to leave this because I've already connected it to the sides and the bottom, and let's see how they go. That's a good tip. Thank you.
Yeah. So he's just wondering, question about wintering hives. What's the difference between wintering a flow hive versus a regular Langstroth hive?
It's both the same principle. You want to take the excluder out and let the bees move freely through the hive if you've got a long, cold, snowy winter ahead. If you're in a subtropical region like us, then you don't have to do anything. You leave the honey super on all year round, and the bees actually get some good flows over the winter. Now, it's been so long since I've used the smoker. The smoker's just about gone out. In other countries where you've got long, cold winters ahead, the difference is some people like to put their flow frames away for the winter, and other people are happy to let the bees forage on them. Probably the the difference is you may get the queen laying in your flow frames come spring, but it's unlikely, especially if you get in there and shake them down and put your excluder back in place. Now, if they're laying in a conventional Hive's extra box, no biggie, you'd still shake them down and put your excluder back in, and those frames would then get used for honey. If they lay in the flow frames, it just means you shouldn't harvest until they've emerged. It won't actually damage the flow frames. So the short answer is there's not much difference. It's both during your winter preparation for those cold climates.
Great. So Craig's asking, is it okay to put the super at the bottom to speed up the process? I guess under the brood box.
Yes, that's a good idea. I'll just add a little bit more to the previous question, which is one thing with the flow hive is you've got this cavity in the roof, which does help with overwintering in those cold climates, because on top of the inner cover, you can add some insulation in here, which could be an old pillow, some styrofoam or whatever you like, in order to insulate the roof, because that's the place that everybody agrees in those cold climates we should put some insulation. Whether you should insulate that side of the hives is an arguable point. Some say no, you should let it get cold, let condensation build up, because that's their water source, that's what they naturally do. And others say that you should wrap it up and keep it like a baby under your pillow. Yeah, a few options there. So the next question was?
The next question was, Craig's asking, is it okay to put the super at the bottom to speed up the process?
Super at the bottom?
Yeah.
Okay, I have heard of one person that does that. They put the super at the bottom, you get a lot of bee traffic over the flow frame, and that'll speed up, I guess, the naturalising of that. Because in the end, the bees are going to coat it all in wax and make it their own. But sometimes the bees are a bit standoffish, and I do know one beekeeper who will put it underneath and for a while before moving it to the top. I don't find a problem, I just put it on top and the bees will use it when they're ready, usually when there's a lot of bees in the box and there's a lot of flowers in order to store honey, and away they'll go working away on the float frames, covering them all in wax, completing all of the cells and storing their honey. Got time for a couple more questions.
Oh, beauty. Simon did a walk-away split and checked. After about 2 weeks, saw the queen, everything was looking great. But then after another 2 weeks, checked again and the hive was empty. No bees, but did have some new comb and some brood. Just any ideas what he may have done wrong?
Yeah. Hive was empty.
Yeah.
Absconded.
Yeah.
That's unusual. If there's brood in there, normally bees will stay until and the brood will emerge and they'll raise a queen and so on. So I don't think there's anything you did wrong. You might have just got a bit of bad luck there. Bees will be bees and they won't necessarily follow the rule book. But one thing we can do to help the split is put the weaker hive in the flight path of the original. So let's say if this was the hive we're splitting from, we'd bump it over and put your hive split right there, and that way it would get the lion's share of the returning foragers, and that would help really make that smaller, weaker hive stronger. Okay, we've got our smoker going again. Not that we really need it. The bees are really putting on a good show today. Very friendly colony.
Great. Cedar, question coming in, what can I do if I've oiled the classic hive, which is made from the Australian hoop pine, instead of painting it?
Okay, so generally if you're oiling it, you will find it'll look great for 6 months or a year, and then you'll get some molds and things tend to go for oils. So we've stopped recommending oil a long time ago, just for that reason, because it's not a lasting long finish, and the hoop pine you're better off painting with an outdoor house paint. So what you could do is let that oil soak in for say 4 months before it starts getting mouldy, or maybe it's 6 months, and what you find is the surface will start drying out, and you can go ahead and paint it with what might be better to be an oil-based house paint because you've already got oil on there. You might want to ask your local hardware store if you about that issue, and they might recommend the right paint to go over the top of it, and that will give you a long lasting finish from then on. Another thing you could do if you really wanted to try and maintain that beautiful look with the hoop pine, which is harder, is you could, when the mildew comes for that oil, you could scrub it off or sand it off. You could scrub it off using a product called oxygen bleach and a scrubber and some gloves, and then you could re-oil and you could go again. But ultimately you'll probably end up painting the Araucaria wood because that's the way to get a long-lasting look with it.
Yeah, great. Mike's wondering, when doing a split cedar, is it better to take the queen in the new hive or leave her in the original hive?
I tend to leave her in the original hive just because I want that hive to maintain its... What I'm trying to do is start and nurse along a new colony, but it doesn't matter, you can do either. I usually let the smaller new one raise its own queen and get going of its own accord. But if you've got a different opinion on that, then chime in. Often if you ask 3 beekeepers, you'll get 5 opinions, and that's part of the beauty of it. There's just never-ending learning with bees and experimentation and seeing what works for you. Just got a mouthful of smoke.
Oh, I love when we do these lives. We've got colonies tuning in from the UK, just down the road from Mr. Jamie Oliver, who's a beekeeper.
Great. Jamie's done some amazing videos. Have a look at them online. He's been doing some great things with his bees and harvesting his honey, and of course using it in his recipes. And it's not some promotion we set up. He just started keeping bees and sharing his flow hives with the world.
Great. Mike's just wondering if you're having a bit of a hard time getting the bees to fill the honey flow super, can you take one out and replace it with a frame with honey to get them starting to fill the super?
I've seen that done, and I haven't really seen it very successful. So I wouldn't bother with that one because it's kind of annoying. You take the back cover off and it doesn't quite seal up the top, and bees are getting out and so on. So I wouldn't bother with shifting honey upstairs. That's a typical thing that I've seen done by existing beekeepers who want to speed up the process. If you do want to speed up the process, what I recommend is getting some burr comb off the top and just squeezing that into the comb surface. So if your hive is ready for the super, they've probably got a bit of burr comb on top here. You're after the wax more so than the honey. Give it a wax like that, and you're just mashing it into the flow frame surface like that. Obviously on the flow frame, not on the box, but I was trying to give you the idea. Do that, put that frame in the window, and you can watch this great process of them recycling that wax into that local area, and that will speed up the process a little bit. Having said that, they probably won't actually store any honey unless you get a good nectar flow and your bees have already filled all the frames in your bottom, and they're really building up in numbers. So patience is the best recipe.
Nice. This is Heaven Chipper in southeast England, sorry, not southeast Queensland. They've heard as queen wing clipping an idea to prevent swarming. And Colin, who's also, I think here in Australia, had heard on the weekend of beekeepers clipping the wings of queens. Why is that going to work to stop your bees from swarming?
It's not something I've ever done. If you've got experience with that, you can chime in below. For me, I prefer not to do that. I guess I just don't want to cut their wings. But I think if I was going to try and maintain the queen, let's just say I was in a super sensitive area and the hive was not allowed to swarm because I had neighbours that really didn't want to see that, or whatever it was. In the springtime you could do what's called queen including if you're worried about them, by getting a piece of the queen excluder and putting it across the entrance, and that way the queen can't leave. When you do that, the drones can't leave either, so you're going to end up with a lot of dead drones on the inside, so it's not something you can do for that long. You don't want to leave it there for weeks and months, or your hive will have some issues. So, but if there's a time when you're really worried about them swarming and you're trying not to let them swarm, then you could use that technique as an alternative. Queen wing clipping, I have heard of it going wrong, and the swarm ball pushes the queen out as they try and leave, and the queen ends up on the ground somewhere and doesn't make it back, and then you've got a hive that's queenless to fix up. But again, ask around. It might be something you want to pursue and have a go at.
Wow, yeah, I'd never heard of that one. My goodness, I learn something every day on this Facebook Live. Seeds, question, if the bees are aggressive, we have this question asked quite a few times. Should I purchase a new queen?
Yes, if you want to change the genetics to being less aggressive. If you're in an area where it doesn't matter, there's not people walking by, and you're okay with that level of aggression, you wear your bee suit and your gloves and you do your inspections and you harvest your honey and you're happy, then there's no reason to change the genetics. But if there is a reason and you want nice calm bees like this, then by all means go in there, find the queen, take her away, and then if you come back the next day, you can insert your queen. And now let's see, I think I might have a little queen cage in my pocket here. So you can order queens in the mail that come in a little cage like that, and they have a block of candy at the end. I'll just put some beeswax in to show you what that will look like. There'll be a block of candy there, and there'll be a queen and about 5 escort bees in here. It'll travel in the mail. The bees will look after the queen by feeding her candy while she's in transit. When it gets to you, if you're not ready to put it in straight away, then you'll just need to give them a little water by wetting your finger and wiping the outside of the queen cage a couple of times a day. Now, don't leave it too long. You really want to get that queen in, preferably the next day after you've taken the old queen away. And you put that in between the frames like this. So it's as simple as popping the hive open and putting it in. Now, the reason why I'm angling that up like that is if some of the escort bees die in there, you don't want them to block the way for the queen to exit. The worker bees and the bees from the inside will be chewing away at that candy. It should be released into the hive a day or two later, and what you'll find is that little technique will be more likely successful because the hive's gotten used to her pheromone. If you just throw her straight in the front, it's said that the hive may be more likely to ball her and kill her as an intruder. But it is a technique that's used also, is people just let the queen straight in the front door. So see what works for you.
Right, so to Clive's in Mullaney, not far up the road from here in Queensland. Just wondering, the 2 central frames in the super look nearly full. Can they do a bit of harvesting on those, or do they have to wait for all the frames to be full?
Absolutely. In Mullaney you'll have a lot of stuff flowering right now, so as soon as you see them full, harvest away and they'll continue to fill them up. So the idea is you'll be storing honey in jars on the shelf rather than in supers on the hive. Conventionally we used to just add more boxes and do like a batch processing at the end of the season. With a flow hive you can just harvest as you see them capping it in that end frame view, and then come back next week and they've probably filled it up again if it's in the springtime, and you can keep harvesting, which is a fantastic thing. Mullaney, home of the Woodford Folk Festival. I remember going to the Mullaney Festival when I was a kid. It was a great thing.
Yeah, the original, wasn't it? I was probably there too, Seeds. Bit older than you. Hey, Heaven Chip are wondering, what is the height that you need on your hive to get that 3 degree slope, as they don't have the feet, so they mustn't have, I just want to know what the piece of timber or something to put that slope on it.
It's about 1 inch or 25 mil up from level at one end will give you 3 degrees. If you're unsure, just slope it a little bit more. There's no harm in doing 4 or 5 degrees. And the idea is then you've got your hive set up for harvesting, and also that little leak back point will work. If honey dribbles in to the trough while they're building, it'll go to the end and then back to the bees, and you won't get that build up in there. So 3 degrees, about yay far at the front from level, and away you go. If you've got our Flow Hive 2, you'll have the level built in the side. You can just get the level bubble in the middle, adjust the feet, and you're away.
Great. Gee, this sounds good. Zara's on the Gold Coast saying that the bees have been all over their elderberry bush and the honey tastes incredible.
Wow, elderflower
Yum.
honey.
Yeah, yum.
That is cool. Yeah, it's amazing. There's as many different flavours and colours of honey in the world as there is flowers producing nectar. So it's an endless joy is to taste the new flavours. I wish I could taste your elderberry.
I know, it sounds good, doesn't it? That elderberry cordial, delicious. Did you spot the queen, Seth?
No, I have not spotted the queen, but she is there because I've seen some young brood and some older brood as well. So, and I can see eggs down the cells. Don't know if you can see this, but give us a thumbs up if you can. It's like a tiny grain of rice down the cells, showing the bee egg. Give us a thumbs up if you can see that. It's probably going to be pretty hard without my sister, the bee spy, here with her macro techniques.
Might be getting another issue with our little audio again as we're winding up here.
Okay, so sorry about the audio technical problems. Thank you so much for all of your questions. It's a joy to be here with you all and answer them. And happy AU Pollinator Week. If you've got questions, put them in the comments below and we'll keep answering them. If you've got answers to questions, by all means, chime in. What we're going to do is put this little hive back together now. And thank you for being so polite about me pulling apart your home.
They're so calm.
They are. Beautiful. Same time next week,